Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Brittney, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Last year, I attended the Venmo Homesteading EXPO. Last year was the first year that expo was in existence, and I attended as a vendor and as a speaker. And my presentation was about growing community and kind of my vision on where I plan on taking my Lilac Hill and how it's going to help our community and people that are homestead minded. And I had a really good response to that presentation, and I thought we filmed it, but I never got the footage back from it, and I think it's useful for you, and so I'm going to just whip this together. I have my presentation and I know what I talked about, so I'm going to do a voiceover with that presentation for you guys. And here in a couple of weeks, on March 28th and March 29th of 2025, is the second annual Venmo Homesteading Expo in Warrensburg, Missouri. And I do plan to attend again this year. I am not going to be a vendor. I did not apply to be a vendor this year because I knew I'd be postpartum and I did not want to add additional stress to myself. So I will not be a vendor this year, but I was offered the opportunity to speak again this year. And this year, my topic is going to be a different subject. I'm going to be talking about running and managing my CSA program, which is Community Shared Agriculture Program. And I do plan to film that presentation as well. And hopefully it'll be out on the channel shortly thereafter, so probably sometime in early April. But if you guys are in the mid-Missouri area, you should head out March 28th and 29th in Warrensburg at the Twin Oaks Event Center. I'll leave information in the description box for you below, but it should be a really good turnout. Last year's event was way better than expected, especially being a first-year event. And so I'm really excited and honored to be attending again this year. And I'm also very proud to say that my Lilac Hill was able to help sponsor this event this year. So I'm very excited, and I think it's going to be a great turnout. And so I really just wanted to get this video put together and out on the channel kind of as a precursor to that event. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the presentation up and do a voiceover for you guys, and I hope you enjoy. So the Venmo Homesteading Expo of 2024 was my first time ever presenting as a speaker for my business, and I was pretty nervous, but by about the third or fourth slide, I was just really excited about it, and I'm really excited to be sharing it with you now. Of course, I want to introduce myself. I have several new subscribers who may not know any of this or even my name. So my name is Brittney Grumke, and I aim to use my passion for homesteading and gardening to grow community. A little bit about me. I grew up in the Kansas City metro. I graduated from Blue Springs South High School in 2010. And growing up, I always hated living in the city. I really never felt like I fit in or I belonged. And I spent the majority of my summers growing up at my grandparents' house in Fayette, Missouri. Just because my parents' work schedules, it was easier for me to kind of hang out there for the summer. It was a lot more fun than just hanging out by myself while they worked. And so I grew up with them in the summer times and out in the country. Their neighbors raised cattle, and from the time I was basically old enough to walk, I would stumble as fast as I could down my grandma's side yard to sit at the edge of the field and watch the cattle graze. So from a very early age, I knew I wanted to live on a farm and I wanted to work with cattle. So I thought I would become a large animal veterinarian. Now, why I thought that was the only way to be on a farm and work with animals is beyond me. Probably something to do with being raised in the suburbs and not being born into a farming family, and just not really being exposed to agriculture at all. But I was determined that that was the way and the only way. So in high school, I started spending weekends and summer vacations with our local veterinarians, as well as a few other not so local veterinarians, just kind of volunteering and helping. And I also joined FFA chapter at my school. Ag programs were not common or popular in the city. In fact, my freshman year was the first year that our school even had an agriculture program. And so I was our chapter's historian. I also competed in dairy cattle judging and ag sales events. My favorite projects was when our advisor helped us build a greenhouse at our school so that we could grow and sell plants in the spring. My advisor impacted my life in more ways than he will probably ever know. He just opened my eyes to a bigger picture of what agriculture was and provided a place where I felt like I belonged. Growing up in Blue Springs, I was teased and made fun of a lot for being so interested in farming. I was called things like hick, redneck, white trash, was often told I would never be successful in farming because I was a girl, and not only was I a girl, I was a city girl. But within the four walls of that agriculture classroom, I was normal and I was accepted. Beyond that, I was encouraged to chase my dream. So I went on to pursue a bachelor's degree from the College of Agriculture at University of Missouri with the intention of applying to vet school. Very quickly, it became clear that I was not going to get into vet school because I could not handle that level of chemistry. And so I changed my emphasis from pre-vet to livestock production. That was what I was really interested in anyways, and so I went ahead and changed my focus. And once I did that, I narrowed my focus to dairy production and swine production. So those were kind of the two avenues into agriculture that I focused on and thought, I'm going to make a career out of this. So I started working and volunteering on several different farms. But after graduating, I accepted a position as a farrowing manager on a very large commercial breed-to-wean swine operation. And this was a CAFO. This was a confined animal feeding operation. This operation had approximately 7,200 sows. Now, keep in mind, I still had a very one-sided exposure to agriculture at this point, and especially animal agriculture. The ag program at MU taught commercial and conventional methods, and that was just about it. Now, I did take one sustainable agriculture course and one pasture dairy course, but neither of those courses were required to get your degree. So as I'm working on this pig farm in confinement, I began to become really discouraged. It just was not what I pictured in my head when I was growing up dreaming of being a farmer. I wanted to be outside, working with nature, and this felt more like a prison to me. While I enjoyed working with the pigs, it didn't take me long to quit this job. I was not fulfilled, and I knew I did not want to do that for the rest of my life, and I could not do that for the rest of my life. So I left this job, and I ended up going into the biotech world. Basically just wanting something that would use my degree that I worked so hard to get. And so I entered the biotech world, and most of the studies I participated in were to research drugs that would help cancer patients, assuming the drugs ever actually made it to market. And that's a topic for an entirely different lecture that I'm not going to get into right now. But I also did some testing on insulin and diabetic testing supplies. And in my head, I thought, I'm using my degree and maybe I'm helping people and helping animals. And so maybe this is the career path for me. But over the course of about 4 years of working my way from a ground floor technician to associate scientist, I just still felt incredibly unfulfilled. The majority of my day, I was sitting behind a computer and pushing papers. And I was making very little money doing it, which made saving for my own farm next to impossible. So I decided that if I'm going to work a job that isn't my dream and that I don't even enjoy, I should at least get paid more, right? So when I was offered a job with a local mortgage company, I decided to go ahead and get my license and give that a shot. I knew I was good at sales, and I knew I was good at talking to people. So I was pretty confident that I would be successful at this. I never planned to write mortgages long term, but I thought it would be a way to pay down some of my debt and save for my own small farm. But first, let's slow down just a little bit, because in order for you to understand what's coming later, I need to explain some of what was going on in the background while I was essentially fumbling through my career. Let's back up to 2014. This is when I decided to start gardening. I was still working on the commercial swine operation at this point, but I wanted a way to connect with nature because, again, I was in confinement all day at work and felt like a prison, and I wanted to be outside. So a lot of my coworkers at that farm had been born and raised in the country, and most of them grew their own vegetables, and it was just kind of a way of life for them. So I thought, well, I can give that a try. And my first garden was a massive failure. It turns out it's really difficult to be at work 70 to 80 hours a week during a drought and expect your garden to do well. Now, I don't have any pictures of the vegetable plot that I had because really it was just one tomato plant, a jalapeno plant, and a cucumber vine. But I do have pictures of the little flower bed that I planted, and this is it. Nothing fancy, nothing stunning, but it sparked an obsession for me. Because my vegetables failed, I decided to embrace the local Amish community by purchasing produce from them. And my aunt at this time sent me a pressure canner as well as a dehydrator, and so I started learning how to can and preserve my food. And that got me really, really interested in being a little bit more self-sustainable. So I started researching and reading as much as I could about growing food and food preservation. At this time, I was also introduced to Joel Salatin and started realizing just how broken our food system was and started to not feel crazy for wanting to farm differently than what I had been taught. This research also led me to the world of YouTube, where I was introduced to people like Jessica Sowards from Roots and Refuge Farm, Amy Fuel, Justin Rhodes. I'm sure most of you are aware of who they are now, but at the time I was introduced to them, this was before they were a household name in the homesteading community. In fact, this was before there really was a homesteading community. This was way before homesteading was cool. Right now, homesteading is the in thing to do. But 10 years ago, it was not. It was something that people made fun of. And at this time, Justin was just getting ready to go out on his Great American Farm Tour. And Jessica and Amy had pretty small channels, but no real brand yet. So really nobody knew who they were. They were very small channels at this time. And as I was watching these homesteaders on YouTube, I was getting so much hope and inspiration, and I started dreaming of having my own homestead. So what do people that are dreaming of homesteading do? They make bread. So I started making my own bread, and I grew a bigger and bigger vegetable garden every year. I started dreaming of having chickens, and I started making my own toothpastes and soap, and I became 100% obsessed with the world of homesteading. I even started sharing what I was doing on Facebook and was met with a lot of questions like, why grow a garden when you can just buy it at the store? And that seems like a lot of work just for a bar of soap. But keep in mind, back then, homesteading was not cool. It was not popular. Now it is, but back then it was not. And I really didn't care because I was never really cool or popular, so it just felt normal for me. But I had filled probably 30 to 40 notebooks full of notes and ideas and dreams and visions. And I even came up with a name for my future homestead and had a logo designed so that I could start selling some of my products. And I actually had a couple of my friends start reaching out to me asking questions about how they could grow food and start canning. And that got me really excited. Okay, so now that you have some backstory, let's fast forward to February of 2020. This was when my son was born. And anyone who has had children, I'm sure will relate to this. But as soon as he was born, immediately all of my priorities shifted. I started thinking differently, and the things I cared about completely changed. I was working as a mortgage lender, and I was about halfway through my pregnancy when I transitioned to a work-from-home role. And then, of course, we all know what happened in the spring of 2020. I don't even have to say it. But I was on maternity leave at the beginning of the lockdowns, and because I grew and preserved a lot of my own food, I had a fully stocked pantry, and I already worked from home. My life didn't really change much. But when my maternity leave was up and I had to get back to working 50 to 60 hours a week, the world was still in lockdown, which meant there were no daycares that were open. So I was working at home and taking care of my son all day by myself. Sometimes I would even be on Zoom calls with my team and on calls with clients while holding or feeding or changing my son. And it got to the point that I was incredibly overwhelmed and frustrated. I really didn't want to send my son to daycare for somebody else to be raising him. Now, that's not a criticism for people that send their kids to daycare. It's just for me, I did not want that. But financially, I had no choice. I had to continue working. So as soon as daycares were open back up, my son was enrolled, and I was very fortunate that the daycare we had was a really, really good daycare. I would still recommend that daycare to anybody who's in need of a daycare. The teachers, the owner, everything was great. So I'm very thankful for that daycare, but it wasn't what I wanted for my son. So in October of 2020, I formed an LLC and I registered with the state of Missouri. I wanted to start growing my homesteading passion into a source of income for my family so that I could bring my son home from daycare and live the life I had been dreaming of since I was a little girl. I opened a registration for my very first CSA program and had 6 families sign up for the 2021 CSA. I was so incredibly excited, and I thought, this is it. This is how I'm going to accomplish my goals. Now, while I'm doing all of this, I'm noticing a huge shift in the online homesteading world. Remember, I said it wasn't popular when I first started getting into it, but because of everything that happened in 2020, people are now just like rushing in droves to YouTube to learn how to grow food and be more self-sufficient. And what started as about 10 to 15 well-known homesteading channels turned into hundreds of channels, seemingly overnight. Small channels that had been around for a while quickly became massive. And I didn't know it at the time, but the 3 people I was introduced to early on in my homesteading journey would go on to be some of the most famous homesteaders with globally recognized brands. And all 3 went on to publish books. Amy Fuel created the Homesteaders of America and hosts the largest homesteading convention in the country every year. Jessica, with Roots and Refuge, had become one of the largest gardening channels on YouTube and is in the process of opening a homestead mercantile. And Justin Rhodes went on to create an entire streaming platform dedicated to creating content by homesteaders for homesteaders. So suddenly there's this massive local food movement and a push to be more sustainable. And I was so excited to be a part of it. I had so much fun with my 2021 CSA program, but I was living in a neighborhood, and I knew that if I wanted this to sustain me financially, I needed more than just a small backyard to work with. So in January of 2022, I had the opportunity to move to a little farmhouse in Odessa, Missouri. I was only going to be spending a third of what I had been spending in rent, and I saw it as an opportunity to expand my gardening efforts, pay off some of my debt, and buy my own farm. I knew this house was going to play a key role in my journey, but I didn't quite know how much. The farmer that I rented this house from started as my landlord, quickly became a friend, and now I call him my husband. And how all that came to be is I was reading a book called Growing a Revolution by David Montgomery. You should check this book out. It's really good. It's about soil health, rotational grazing, and cover crop usage. I was so intrigued by some of what I was reading. I was taking all kinds of notes, and I had a ton of questions. After all, I had little to no experience with the world of row crop, regenerative ag, or rotational grazing. So I decided to ask my landlord if he would be willing to let me pick his brain a little bit, because I knew that he utilized some of those practices. My request turned into him asking me to dinner, which was never my intention, but it certainly did work out in my favor. I started to feel like I was finally getting close to my dream. My YouTube channel that I had started back in 2018 was starting to grow a little bit. It's still a pretty small channel, but I was starting to gain some followers, and I had a garden club that I was running on Facebook. I paid off all of my credit card debt. My son had a safe house out in the country to grow up and be free and explore. I was honing all of my skills, and I had found the man I knew I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and that would not only support my vision, but would help me to accomplish it. And so then, on a Monday morning in October of 2022, when everything seemed to be going great in my world, I got a call that I lost my full-time sales job effective immediately. I was freaked out. I had never lost a job before. And Kyle and I had only been dating a few months. We were not married yet, so I was still renting from him, and my business wasn't quite making enough money yet to solely rely on it to pay my bills. So I did what any parent would do, and I took the first job offer that came my way to keep a roof over our head and food in our bellies. I thought that was just what I was supposed to do. Looking back, I realized I probably just needed to believe in my abilities as much as I believed in my dream. But a few short months after I started that job and I was miserable, I decided to quit. And I decided to just believe in myself, and I became 100% self-employed. It is so crystal clear to me now, looking back, hindsight's always 20/20, that while I was fumbling through my 20s with seemingly no direction, God was actually pushing me to my fullest potential. And when I sowed that first seed in my 2014 garden, God was sowing a seed in me. He was leading me on a path that would not only provide for me, but it would introduce me to my husband, allow me more time with my son, give me a sense of fulfillment, and also bring me closer to God and live in a way that glorifies Him. In October of 2023, 1 year after losing my job, I married my best friend, moved out of the rental house, and into our forever home. And in December, we brought my son home from daycare. So now I'm living my absolute dream life. And it never would have happened if I hadn't planted that very first garden in 2014. And so now I want to help others do the same thing. I've been on this journey for over a decade, and I still don't consider myself an expert. I'm always learning, and I want to be the resource that I wish that I had when I first started homesteading. This year, I expanded my CSA program. We will be adding a high tunnel, a farm store, and a window greenhouse for seed starting. But my CSA program is only the tip of the iceberg for me. Now, I told you all at the beginning that my goal is to use my passion for homesteading and gardening to build a community, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I have a 5 and a 10-year plan for this business, and I'm not going to get into too many of the details. You're just going to have to follow my journey and see it for yourself. But I will tell you that I plan to collaborate with other local farmers. I am only one person, and I cannot do everything. There is certainly room in this space for all of us. So I plan to host some teaching workshops and events, and my hope is that soon I will be able to provide internships and work experience to others that are interested in growing their own food and homesteading in general. When I was in my homestead dreaming phase and living in the suburbs, I desperately wanted a place that I could go to in my area to learn, to meet like-minded people, and to feel like I had a community. My long-term vision, and again, I'm not giving you all of the details, but I plan to have a place for my community to come to with their families, a place to bridge the gap between consumer and farmer, a place that supports farmers in my area and grows the local community, a place for someone in their homestead dreaming phase to come to, spend an afternoon, and feel like they belong. There will be a market overflowing with fresh produce grown by local farmers, freezers full of pasture-raised meat grown locally, ethically, and sustainably, beautiful gardens, and a place to sit and enjoy a cup of coffee or fellowship with a friend, a garden center to buy plants and grow your very own garden at home, and a place to host events just like this one, the Venmo Homestead EXPO. A place to spread this homesteading obsession with as many people as we can, because after all, there is room in this community for all of us. And I sure hope you want to be a part of it. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, please follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, as well as TikTok. And come on out to the Venmo Homestead EXPO if you're in the area. Again, it's March 28th and 29th, 2025 in Warrensburg, Missouri. I'll leave all the information in the description box below for you. I hope to see you there, and as soon as I can, I will post the video for this year's topic, which is growing and managing my CSA program. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down below for me. I'd love to answer those for you, and I hope to see you at the Mid-Mo Homestead Expo.